the better you can become at communication, the better your business is going to have if you are the face of your business in terms of both winning people over, negotiating, and even when it comes down to getting your message out.
This is The Entrepreneur Way with Neil Ball. Unlocking the secrets of successful entrepreneurs 7 days a week. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter at Neil D. Ball. Napoleon Hill said the power of the mastermind is the driving force. To discover how you can unlock the potential in your business using the power of a mastermind, go to mastermindunlimited.com. And now, here is your host, Neil Ball.
Hello, it's Neil Ball here. Thank you so much for joining me today on The Entrepreneur Way. The Entrepreneur Way is about the entrepreneur's journey, the vision, the mindset, the commitment, the sacrifice, failures and successes. I am so excited to bring you our special guest today, Corey Poirier. But before I introduce you to him, I have a quote for you. Robert Plant said, "You have to ask these questions. Who pays the piper and what is valuable in his life?" The Entrepreneur Way asks the questions so we all get the insight, inspiration and ideas to apply in our businesses. Corey, welcome to the show. Are you ready to share your version of the Entrepreneur Way with us?
I sure am, Neil.
Thank you for coming on the show, Corey.
Well, thank you for having me. I for a second there, I almost thought when you asked the question, I would say, no, not really. Can you try me back later? just see how you handled it. But yeah, I'm 100% ready.
That's the comic coming out in you there, isn't it?
Perhaps a little bit.
Corey Poirier is an award-winning keynote speaker, having presented to over 100,000 attendees and having shared the bill with Deepak Chopra, Stephen MR Covey, television personalities, and General Rick Hillier. He is an award-winning executive, a broadcaster, and a host of the top-rated Conversations with Passion radio show. He is also an international best-selling author with his book Share Your Message with the World. He is a regular columnist with over 900 articles in print, and he has had television specials on Eastlink TV and Tellie television, and has also been seen on CBC, CTV, Global, and has presented TEDx and MoMonday's talks, and is the founder of an established media company. Corey, can you provide us with some more insight into your business and personal life to allow us to get to know more about what you do and who you are?
Yeah, I sure can. So I guess on the business side first, my core business for the last, I don't know, maybe 14 years has been that of a professional speaker. And so this is while being an entrepreneur, running other companies. I had a business publication, monthly publication, and it's print, so it was a print publication, not just digital, for the better part of 7 years, and ran that at the same time while running my speaking business. And then when I decided to make the shift there, we went into a radio show with sponsors and the whole meal deal. So I've been an entrepreneur the entire time, but the speaking business has kind of been let's say the core essence of who I was and who I am on the business side. It's definitely my biggest passion. Mm-hmm. And then, if I go to the personal side, I'm somebody who was raised by a single mother, and I believe that plays a big part in who I am. I am a person that definitely, I guess, would say that I'm an animal lover. I have right now cats and a puppy dog, and I definitely have an appreciation for the unconditional love that animals share with us. I'm a yogi, I guess, at heart, and I go through certain spurts where I'm practicing yoga daily, and then other times where not as frequently, but definitely still a yogi for the last 20 years. I meditate. So, those are kind of some of the things in terms of where I spend my personal time. I'm also a big concert goer, and I love traveling to new locations. So I think that's kind of me on the business and personal side.
Mm-hmm. So where does most of your income come from then in what you do?
Well, I have to say it's definitely not an equal split. So I would say the speaking has kind of been, first and foremost for a long time. I'm sort of shifting that a bit. I'm shifting more and more online. Even the radio show, we've taken it to a digital format as well, and it's we have sponsors involved, so there's definitely a revenue stream coming in from that. It hasn't matched my speaking yet, but it's definitely a very nice supplemental income. And I will say too, Neil, that it's not like I won't say it's like playing around. I mean, it's when I look at the sponsorships we bring in, it's bigger than what I made as an income before becoming an entrepreneur at any point in my life.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And what do you enjoy most about what you do, Corey?
I probably enjoy the ability that both, I guess, every business that I've been involved with since I launched my speaking career, I think I really enjoy the ability it gives me to impact other people's lives. There's not many, I have to say there's not many ways, unless you're kind of a lifestyle entrepreneur, that you can see the direct impact you have on people's lives than being in a business where you're sharing wisdom, knowledge, information, hoping to maybe transform somebody's life. So I feel that's what the best part is, that you get to impact other people's lives in a positive way, and then at the same time get to see the difference that you're making with them.
Mm-hmm. And what is it that drives you?
For me, I guess the driving force is probably the chasing of that impact, the goal of constantly trying to improve other people's lives, or even, I mean, it's not that I have all the answers. So even just maybe share some insight or wisdom with them that maybe they haven't heard before. I spend a lot of my times interviewing what I call enlightened superachievers, much like Napoleon Hill did back in the day, if you will. Mm-hmm. And so I guess I really thrive on gaining that exclusive wisdom and insight that it's taken somebody thousands of hours to learn, and then sharing the high notes or the highlights with other people. And that, it kind of drives me to know that there's always something new we can learn that'll impact our lives. And there's always opportunity for me to perhaps reach more people and maybe just change one life, mm-hmm. even if it's once a month or, once every year. That would be, substantial in terms of the impact it has on the world.
Yeah. And how do you relax when you're not working in your business?
You know what? It's funny. I always tell people, if you catch me working, you let me know and I'll stop. I truly love what I do. So, I think that I'm sort of relaxing when I'm doing what I do. It's funny. I heard this interview one time with David Foster. And so he, the producer, musician, and he asked Darren Hardy of Success Magazine, Darren, when is it that I'm going to feel okay just going to a beach and relaxing like most people do? And Darren said something that I thought was really profound. He said, I think when you're in the studio with a Whitney Houston or a Seal, Celine Dion, that is your beach. That's when you're relaxing. So to me, they don't have to be separated. We always hear this talk about having balance, mm-hmm. and in a lot of people's minds, that means separating work from play. And I like to intertwine the two and mix the two. So the first part to that answer, I would say, is that I'm constantly, I feel, always playing. So that is kind of my downtime, is doing this thing that I love and sharing messages and impacting people. At the same time, to give you, I guess a more concrete answer, I like spending time with my girlfriend, with my family, with the pets that I just mentioned. I mentioned yoga and meditation. I haven't performed stand-up in a while. You alluded to my stand-up time, mm-hmm. Or career earlier. So I spent 9 years performing around 700 shows in stand-up. And, every now, what I did in the past was when I wanted a break, I would go and jump on the stage and perform. I also play music in clubs. So that's, when I get into that mode for a few months and start taking on gigs, that allows me to get some downtime from the work of sharing a message and impacting lives. So I definitely have lots of pastimes and lots of, ways that I sort of enjoy my time off or time sharpening the saw. I even play video games. I love Lego PlayStation 3 games. That's been my kind of guilty pleasure recently. Mm-hmm. So those are just some of the ways I guess I spend my spare time, if I actually have any, or whatever that is to me.
Yeah, I think when you enjoy what you do, it's very difficult the line becomes very blurred between what you enjoy and what you don't enjoy, doesn't it? Because you enjoy all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's sort of, it's funny because you heard me, talking about, well, on one end, I live for what I do. I mean, this is my passion. And when you're at play with your passion, it's not really working. But then I also tried to even talk about the other areas where, I spend some of my downtime, but as you could probably tell, they're interspersed. I mean, it's not abnormal. It wouldn't be abnormal for me to be working with a client as a speaker and then, come home on a break before going and working with other clients and pick up the guitar and play for a half hour. Mm-hmm. That's, to me, that there doesn't have to be a separation between the two.
Mm. And do you have any entrepreneurial role models?
Yeah, I sure do. So, if I go back on the personal side of my life, I would, seek it. I would say somebody like my grandfather, who was my first, I guess, example as an entrepreneur. And he took on, one of the things he did was he built a fiberglass space shuttle, one of only 6 replicas in the world. And this is a carpenter with a bag of nails and a hammer who was used to working with wood. So as an entrepreneur, taking that on, stepping outside his comfort zone, that, he became a hero to me that way and showed me what's possible. And I was only 7 years of age at the time. And then on the other end of the spectrum, if I go to the business side, I would say somebody like a Richard Branson, who follows his passion, doesn't seem to slow down, and just seems to find new ways to reinvent himself on a regular basis. So, from one end of the spectrum to the other, I would say my grandfather all the way to Richard Branson.
Corey, can we talk about the time before you were an entrepreneur? What difficulties did you have to overcome when you started your business?
I think the biggest difficulty for me, and I feel this is a difficulty for a lot of entrepreneurs, is accepting that you may have to do some things that you don't like, especially at first, in the nature of running your business. So if you're lucky enough to get to live your passion, and that involves running your business, there may be parts of it you don't like, especially when you might not have the resources to get somebody else to help you do that. So an example could be the accounting. I didn't realize how much was involved in the accounting and how much I was going to dislike doing that accounting on a regular basis. But that became a challenge for me because, it starts making you question, is this worth it? When the accounting was maybe 30% of what you're doing and you dislike that strongly. And I actually have an accounting diploma. And what I learned by taking an almost 2-year program and then actually going and working as a bookkeeper is that that's not my fit. That's not my passion. So I think that was a big challenge for me, is to know that I was going to be doing some things that I didn't like to be able to do what I really loved. And then I think the secondary part was being able to slow down and realize you can actually get as much done without working all day and all night and all weekend.
And did you have any doubts that delayed you starting your business?
I don't feel I did. I feel I was pretty much ready to rock and roll with it. In fact, me and a business partner started the first business, and he recognized within the first month and a half that the business wasn't for him and told me point blank that he wanted to go find a different cause and a different passion. And I will say that cost me dearly in the business financially, because I had to buy him back out a month after he bought in, and we'd already spent a lot of the money. So that was a major challenge. But for me personally, I went all in. So when he decided that it wasn't for him and it wasn't really his fit, I even went further in. So, and this was right from, I'm talking from day one until he told me that a month in. Every day I was up and ready to rock and roll, and I was going over to his house, and we talk about this now and laugh about it, but I'd have to knock on his windows, knock on the door, trying to get him up. He'd only start the day around 10, and I had already started at 7, and he'd ask me to drop him back off or drop him off at the beach around 3. Mm-hmm. And so we weren't ideally set as business partners, but I really believe now it's because I had found a passion and it wasn't his passion. So for me personally, that it wasn't really hard to get that, jump right in, because it obviously was something I was passionate about, and I knew that right from the start.
Yeah. What type of business was that?
It was, I mentioned having a business publication. Well, this was the precursor to that. This was the first publication I ever put out. So when I was about 19, I put out a business publication, and it was similar for people listening who know of Success Magazine. It was similar to Success Magazine, but more of a regional type publication. So it was roughly 20 to 32 pages newsprint, sharing inspirational business stories. And so that was my very first business with that business partner I mentioned. And we launched it, and I ran it for about a year. And, there's a whole other story there about what I learned from that experience and how humbling it was to know that the business wasn't going to survive in the way that I thought it was. But yeah, I ran that for a year, and then fast forward a bunch of years later, I felt I'd never closed the door properly on that paper. So that was why I actually relaunched the publication I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. So other than choosing the wrong business partner, what other mistakes did you make that slowed your journey?
I don't know if this slowed my journey, but it definitely put a halt to it.
Yeah.
Whenever I finally decided to walk away, was that I started with a lack of cash flow. And it wasn't by choosing. It wasn't, not planning. There was no, I want to say there was no real blame to anybody, or, if I can even dare say that, maybe no even blame to myself. I just started the business without knowing I was going to be going into business and didn't have the cash flow at the time. We went through an entrepreneurial program where they basically gave us weekly, almost like an honorarium. It was pretty small, and it was barely enough to pay your bills. So then at the end of that program, we knew then we were going to be starting our own business. But of course, that when you're running with a limited lack of funds in the first place, it doesn't give you a lot of time to put any extras away. And then we started the business. We each got seed money of $2,500 each. But to put that in perspective, every issue of the publication cost around $3,500. So by the second month, if we didn't sell any ads, we were already going to be running in a deficit. And so I was just under, I want to say I was under cash flow ready whenever I started the business. So that was really something that, like I said, it wasn't a setback, but it definitely put things to a halt once I realized that to keep running in that fashion, I was going to be always running right to the penny. So if any unforeseen things happened, it could sink the business. And that was kind of why I decided to walk away before that occurred.
Yeah, I think that's quite a common thing for startups, isn't it? I think a lot of people go into business without sufficient funding, and sometimes they've got a perfectly valid idea, but it just fails because they've run out of cash before they can get enough momentum to it.
Yeah, and there were a lot of variables that happened, Neil, in our case. Like, as I mentioned, that business partner walking away, that cost me it cost me more than the seed money we had to start. So, all of a sudden, we were selling a lot more in the way of ads than I thought we were going to. So that's how we paid for the publication, was through advertising sales. We sold a lot more than I planned or thought we would. But the problem was, even though we never lost money. So we never actually lost money on an issue. But I had to actually spend 3 months paying back the loan that him and I took together because of the fact that he was leaving the business and I had to buy him out based on equity. So it was almost like we started under, let's say, funded, and then by having to pay him back again, I was underfunded again 3 months into the business. So it was a weird scenario that, that just kind of, it said to me that, things were happening the way they were meant to. For those two things that happened that early on, I said, you know what, let's just ride this wave and see where it takes us, but know that we may have to pull the trigger at some point, and it's okay if we do. Yeah.
I think that sort of brings to light the thought that you obviously need to have some kind of agreement that is time-based as well when you go into partnership with somebody like that, don't you, I think? Because if someone's putting money into something and then they change their mind 2 months later, it really messes up all your plans, doesn't it, really, I suppose?
Yeah, it absolutely does, especially, like I say, when you don't have a whole bunch of excess cash flow to just kind of say, here's your buyout.
And what are some of the things that you did before you started your business that'd be helpful tips to some of the listeners who haven't yet taken the first step on the entrepreneur way?
I have to say, this is sort of in between businesses, but it's definitely before I started my main core businesses. It's kind of I guess we'll say it's a weird, I guess maybe tip, but at the same time, it sort of will make sense. But I mentioned the stand-up comedy. And the stand-up comedy, I feel, really gave me a lot of experience in communication and speaking, let's say, professionally and in public. But, when I say this, it doesn't have to be stand-up comedy. Another thing I did around the same time is I joined a group called Toastmasters. And then I spent time in Rotary. And in all three of these, comedy and these two groups, you learn about speaking in public, you learn about communication. And so one of the things I would say that I guess was probably maybe one of the most beneficial things that I did in between, my minor business venture that I started with and then my real business ventures, was learning about the importance of communication and finding a way to practice my communication. So what I feel people could take from that is find a way to, whether it's, like I say, join a group like Toastmasters, or whether it's find a way to just speak in front of a group of people. But the better you can become at communication, the better your business is going to have if you are the face of your business in terms of both winning people over, negotiating, and even when it comes down to getting your message out.
I think communication really is the key to success in virtually everything, isn't it, if you think about it? Because all great leaders are great communicators, virtually. I can't think of any that aren't.
Yeah, and I spent, I should add too that I spent the years in between, I spent about 10 years in sales. So I worked for Toshiba Canada for the first 5 years of my corporate sales career, and then Konica Minolta for another 5 years. And for listeners who may not be as familiar with one of those two companies, I think Toshiba is pretty well a worldwide name, being cameras, TVs, laptops. But I was in the industry that Xerox sort of created. So the Xerox and Canon world, those are kind of be the two big names. So I spent 10 years in sales in those worlds. And, the lessons I learned being in sales in general, all I can say is they were invaluable to running your own business. So, communication obviously is a big part of that, being in sales, but also learning how to read customers, learning how to read situations, learning how to negotiate, learning how to understand benefits and how you can approach clients and show them the benefits of either working with you or taking on your product. So I guess I will say in between, those are some of the skills I learned too, the importance of those skills as well.
Can we just talk about the entrepreneurial journey a little bit, Corey? Do you think culture is important from the beginning in a business?
So first, the answer is absolutely yes.
Yeah.
I have to say that, I had so I approached my businesses a little bit different than, let's say, an Apple computers would, where thousands and thousands of employees. But right from the jump, if I'm working with somebody that might be a freelancer for me or my assistant right now, or, when I had the first publication and the second one, we had a lot of freelance writers. I had my designer, printer. So, whether it was a supplier partner relationship or whether it was like the freelance writers being essentially an employee relationship, in every aspect of that, I felt culture was crucial to the extent that, I felt that if you didn't create a culture where people felt they could approach you, they could tell you where you made a mistake. And especially when you think about it in the publication world, if you have something wrong in your article, and let's say it's my feature column, if they don't feel, like I say, a freelance writer doesn't feel when reading it that they can tell me, or my designer doesn't feel because I'm paying them that they can tell me that there's an issue there or that something needs to be changed, then it's only going to impact the publication, the clients, the readers, everybody, even the employees. So from a culture point of view, whether you create a culture where people feel they can approach you, people feel they can have fun, people feel that it doesn't have to be work, my answer is absolutely, I think it's crucial.
And knowing what you know now, is there anything that if you'd known it when you started out would have helped you to shortcut the learning curve?
There's so much. So I mentioned cash flow, start out cash flow rich if you can. I didn't mention another thing I learned is that lifelong learners are leaders. So I didn't read my first book until I was 27 years of age. And I don't mind if you decide to ask me what book changed my life or what my favorite book is, I'll tell you that book. But, that as far as learning, the power of learning. So I read the first book at 27. I hadn't, podcasting didn't exist. Radio shows really, for the large part, weren't available on personal development. You couldn't get audiobooks. So really reading in the book form was one of the only ways you could sort of feed your mind regularly. It wasn't the only way, but it was one of the best ways, I guess, at that time. And so I hadn't read a book till I was 27. So even after starting my businesses, I still hadn't read a full book. And so what I would have done sooner, had I known better, is I would have started reading sooner. Because once I read that first book, the light was, I'm going to say is switched on. I read now. Well, I've slowed down in the last couple of months, but normally I would read about 3 to 5 books a month. I listen to podcasts every month. I watch TED Talks. I read Success Magazine, and on and on and on. So one of the things I wish I would have known sooner is the power of feeding your mind and turning your car even into what Brian Tracy calls your mobile library. So the time that you're spending in your car driving places, why not find a way to feed your mind with audio programs and podcasts and what have you? So I just really would have spent more time feeding my mind earlier in life had I known what I know now and had I learned that a little bit earlier.
I'll come back to your favorite book shortly, but my next question for you is how much do you think gut feeling influences your decisions in your business?
I can't speak for everybody else, but for me, I would put it up in the high percentages. So like maybe an 80%, 85%. I will say too, I have a little system that I use, Neil, for making decisions, and it's pretty easy and basic, but that doesn't mean it's it's simple. So what it is essentially is I have this little test, and I have the 5 things that are part of my mission or personal statement, or sorry, I should say purpose statement. So I have a mission statement / purpose statement, whichever the two you want to call it. I use mission because that's what people recognize the name of, but I usually call it my purpose statement. And that statement, how that reads out for me is I want to be the guy who donates, motivates, inspires, educates, and entertains. And that's kind of my 5-point test. So if somebody asks me to make a decision on something, I weigh it against that and say, how many of those is it? And if it's 2 or less, it's a pretty easy no, or it's a close to a no. No, if it's a 3, then it becomes a let's think about this at least for a couple hours, let's sit on this. And if it's 4 or above, it's the easiest yes I'll ever make. And in each case, without any regret. So I have to say, I'm the one, when somebody asks, I'm the one who puts that test to it. So I have to feel that's pretty much a gut decision. And so if that's a gut decision, I use that system for probably 85 to 90% of my decisions. So I have to say the gut comes into it a lot. And for people listening who say, how can I use that system? It's simply sitting down and saying, what is your personal mission statement? Or what is your purpose statement? What do you want to be known as in terms of what impact you make? What is the thing that you do really well? And then when somebody asks you to take something on, ask yourself, does it align with that mission? And if it does, if you can take it on, jump in. If you can't, jump out.
I've had someone else have a similar philosophy on answering questions like that. Corey, life is made of constant change, whether we like it or not. In fact, some people say the only constant is change. How do you try to keep up with change?
I just try to be somebody who is open to being adaptable and flexible and even open to seeing the possibilities. So I feel sometimes with change, sometimes we can't see the potential or the future of what this change could mean. Sometimes it could be a bad change, sometimes it could be a good change, but I feel I usually like to look at every angle and say, what could be the positives of this? And if there's enough positives to give it a chance, then I'll usually dive in. So, if I use a weird example or a quick example, let's use something like PayPal, a universal way people use to accept and send payments. Well, I had a cash flow situation early in my career. And one of the ways I alleviated that, because I was waiting for people to send checks and, they were just they were busy and they didn't have a chance to sign it, or they're thinking about all the things they got to deal with. So that's the last thing on their mind. And on the accounting side, they had to wait for 2 signatures and things like that. But it turned out in a lot of cases, they might be able to pay by credit card, especially if they're going to get a small discount. Well, when I first was approached with the idea of PayPal, most of the people I talked to said, oh, that's just something to use to pay on eBay. They didn't see it as the potential for receiving quicker and more seamless payments and being able to accept credit card payments without having to go through a merchant account where maybe you can only accept 1 or 2 different types of credit cards. So, that's an example where at first it came to me and I had to decide, am I willing to adapt to it and see how it could benefit me, or am I going to ignore it? Mm-hmm. And still, now we're 14 years after I started accepting payments via PayPal, and I have to say it transformed my cash flow in my business. And now there's been new ways that I've been able to, things like email money transfer, which is popular in Canada. There's other things I've been able to take on that have continued that process. And had I not taken on the first one, I might be still kind of shying away from it. And yet I know, all these years later, I know clients who tell me they have cash flow problems, and yet they've never even tried an option like a PayPal, which is, it's secured basically by eBay. I mean, you can't get much more secure. So I kind of guess answer the question, Neil, is that I try to look at what's the possibilities. I try to have an open mind. And then if it seems like there's more, benefits or positives than negatives in the long-term potential of this change that I'll have to make, then I dive in and test it. But I always make sure that I can steer the ship back if it doesn't work.
Mm-hmm. And what is your favorite book on entrepreneurialism, business, personal development, leadership, or motivation? And can you tell us why you have chosen it?
That's an easy one. It's the one I alluded to earlier. So it's How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie.
Yeah.
And I chose it for 2 simple reasons. The easiest answer would be because it's the game changer book for me. It's the first book I ever read. It made me realize what is possible when it comes to books. And then on the flip side, the second reason I would say that one is because whether you're a business professional or whether it's on a personal basis, you can apply that book to your life in so many ways. And if you read that book after years after reading it the first time or the last time you read it, it speaks to you where you're at now. So those would be kind of my 2 big reasons why that book is a go-to book for me.
Yeah, I've read that a long time ago. I think it's time for me to read that again. Everyone, when you have a busy life, listening to audiobooks is a great way to expand your knowledge in the time when you may be doing other things, such as driving or when you're at the gym. We have a special offer for you of a free audiobook of your choosing. To choose your free audiobook, go to www.freeaudiobookoffer.com. As long as you haven't already signed up, then you will qualify. Corey, what I'd like to do now with you is speculate a little bit about the future with you. What one thing would you do with your business if you knew that you could not fail?
What I would probably do if I knew it sort of could not fail, I think that what I would do is I would try to take the business itself completely online, so 100% online, so that I could reach a lot more people, and at the same time be able to choose that I'm going to do X amount of speaking engagements only per year. And so when I say that, I mean, I know that part wouldn't fail because I'm already doing more than I would take on for speaking engagements. But I mean, to be able to select these specific X number of talks, but at the same time have the business other than that completely online rather than partially. If I knew that couldn't fail, I would go all in with that quicker and sooner than the kind of the stagger process that I had been doing that in.
Mm-hmm. What skill, if you were excellent at it, would help you the most to double your business?
Wow. Well, I mean, if I can say one that I already shared, and if I'm talking in general, that can double our business, I would say, of course, communication. But if I talked about what I guess I'm already seeing over the years, what's kind of helped continue to grow my business at such a rapid rate, it's striving to deliver massive value without expecting to receive anything in return.
And in 5 years from now, if a well-known business publication was publishing an article on your business after talking to your customers and suppliers, what would you like it to say?
Well, I would like to say that I would like that article to say that this person transformed or changed my life. Their company transformed or changed my life. This is a company you want to deal with because they're striving to move people from A to Z. They're trying to affect and impact change in both people and in the world. So I really think it still comes back to that whole idea of creating lasting impact and maybe significance if I can. So those are the two things I think I would like to see that article say. And then the way, in the article, I'd like to maybe see it say that he did that by going back to that whole idea of delivering massive value on a regular basis. And he had a skill for doing that and measuring it and making sure that value was delivered.
Mm-hmm. We're now at the part of the show where you share 3 golden nuggets with us. Corey, what is your favorite quote and how have you applied it in your life?
Favorite quote is probably, it's a Zig Ziglar quote. And I'm going to paraphrase it best, but essentially it says, you can have anything you want in life if you will just help enough other people get what they want. Yeah. And this really goes back to that whole idea of delivering value. So being able to get to the heart of what other people want and then helping them get there, I feel will help you get to wherever you're trying to get. So that quote, I try to apply it in my life. Like even the new book launch that you and I were chatting about, by putting it out free and putting it, putting enough work into it that my assistant said to me, this book shouldn't be free. I mean, to me, that was the goal, right? When somebody says you should not give this book away for free, absolutely not. That is the goal. And so how I try to apply that quote that I mentioned is that I'm trying to get other people what they want through the book that I'm giving them for free. And, the end result hopefully will be that they say, well, I want to follow Corey on his journey and maybe dive deeper with him at some point and learn more about how I can work with him in the future. If they don't, at the very minimum, I'm just glad that I've been able to help them get what they want or at least deliver more value.
And do you have any favorite online resources that you can share with us?
Yeah, I have. Well, I have, I guess we'll say various ones, but probably the big ones, you and I were talking and we're talking about podcasts and shows. So I love Stitcher Radio and I love iTunes. Those are 2 great ones because, I find that if you want to look up a certain topic area that you really want to dive into, it's simple. It's usually as simple as a search that you can follow and subscribe to and follow people that are delivering the kind of content and message you want to hear. So right now, of course, I'm in the process of a book launch. So I listened to recently while driving a podcast by Pat Flynn, who has the Smart Passive Income show. And I listened to a podcast where Pat talked about how to build a street team for your launches. And I took some stuff away from that podcast. So I just think it's amazing that we're able to essentially, on a whim, 24/7, able to dive into something like, a podcast or a show on our demand and learn stuff that can transform our own lives, or learn stuff that we can use in the business that we're running to apply and grow that business the very next day. So I would say probably a big resource for me is podcasting, whatever way you want to choose to listen to it, whether it's Blog Talk Radio, Stitcher, on the person's website in general, whether it's through iTunes. I just think that's a great online resource, is the ability to listen to a podcast.
Yeah, I agree. I think there's so many people who haven't yet really discovered that as well, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I heard a number recently, like only 15% of North Americans, and I don't know how they did the study, but the number I heard was that only 15% of North Americans have ever even heard of a podcast, like heard of it.
Yeah. So there's massive potential there, isn't there?
Absolutely.
What is your best advice to other entrepreneurs?
Best advice, I would say, is to uncover your passion. So if you're an entrepreneur, so we've interviewed now over 3,400 enlightened super achievers. And I get asked the question a lot, what's the common trait? And the number one most common trait is that they've uncovered their passion and they're living on purpose. So I'd be remiss not to say that that's the advice I would give to entrepreneurs, is that they need to make sure that what they're doing is in line with their purpose and passion. And then I would go one step further and say, whenever they're taking on different things into their business, whether it's taking on a task, taking on a new project, a new product, service, whatever, or taking on even a new partner, make sure that everyone aligns with their goals, mission, and purpose. That would be the advice I would give them, because if you're not following your passion, or the people that you're working with aren't also aligned with that same passion and purpose, you're going to have a major challenge overcoming the obstacles you're going to deal with on your road to entrepreneurial success.
Everyone, if you didn't manage to get a note of Corey's favourite resource or his favourite book, you can find the links on Corey's show notes page. Just go to the entrepreneurway.com and search for Corey or Corey Poirier in the search box. Corey, is there anything else that you'd like to add about your business?
Well, I mean, obviously, you heard me, Neil, in terms of the sort of cheap plug for the book earlier. Where it is free, I don't think it's like a plug to get somebody to jump on and buy 1,000 copies or anything. But what I would say to listeners about the book, and by the way, I should mention too, last year, 6 months ago, we put out a book called Thriving. And we decided to re-release it for free at the same time. So basically, one book is over 100 pages, the other one's over 200 pages, both free. So what I would say to people is that you really, at the end of the day, lifelong learners are leaders. If we spend time growing and feeding our mind, that is how we're going to get outside our comfort zone and tap into our passions and reach our full potential. And I like to think that either of those two books, we spent hundreds of hours on each of them. We have insights by over 100 thought leaders in both of them. That's, separate from the core book itself. And these are approved by people like Zig Ziglar, Jack Canfield. These are some of the people who share their insights in the book. And so what I would say is that, in terms of my business, if you want to get a better feel for who I am, but at the same time have the potential to find ways to grow and change your business, maybe go over and grab a copy of the book for free. If you're cool with it, Neil, I can tell them how they can get a copy.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's pretty easy. It's just the website setup for the books thisisthebook.com. When we originally set it up, we didn't know we were going to release the second one, so we didn't add the plural. Mm-hmm. But thisisthebook.com. And when you get onto that page, the Enlightened book right at the top, it asks for a code. That code they need to know is best you ever, and that's all spelled out. So best you ever. And right, if they go further down to the page, the Thriving book, it tells you the code right there. So I guess that's what I'd probably share about my business, because again, they're free right now. So I have no vested interest other than I want to help people grow and maybe introduce myself to them a little bit further.
Mm-hmm. Corey, it's been an absolute honor having you on the show. Thank you so much for coming on here. You've really provided us with some great insight into what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and you've certainly inspired us with some of the stuff that you've said. So Thank you very much.
Thank you, Neil. It's been an absolute pleasure, and thanks for all you're doing. I don't think there can ever be too many insights available to entrepreneurs. I think entrepreneurs are what make our world go round and make this place magical. So the more advice we have for entrepreneurs, the better. And I love what you're doing with the show. So thank you, and keep on doing what you're doing.
Thank you, Corey. You're welcome.
Thank you for listening to The Entrepreneur Way. Subscribe to our podcast and follow us on Twitter @Neil D. Ball.